at 1 o'clock when we are joined by Chip Patterson, CBSSports.com, moderator of the Cover 3 podcast, the best stop for you when you want to hear about college football, college sports. Chip Patterson is there. What's up, my friend?
Thank you very much for the ringing endorsement of the Cover 3 podcast. You know, we've been in draft season.
I know.
Just a lot of drafting. And so I feel like we're providing a unique opportunity for people to jump on board and get a feel for what we're up to.
All right. So real quick, because I can't talk about it because I have nothing about it. But you're drafting coaches as recruiters. Now, is this just head coaches, or are we drafting position coaches who also happen to be good recruiters? Because I follow recruiting like I do needlepoint, which is to say I don't. So to explain to me what this is.
The coach draft is the brainchild of now Vanderbilt general manager Barton Simmons, formerly my co-host on the podcast.
Right.
6-round draft, and you have to fill out your roster with one head coach, one offensive coordinator, one defensive coordinator, and 3 wild card picks. Nick Saban was first round, first overall pick. That's not a huge surprise, but we had a position coach go second because of some of the game theory involved. I mean, there's a lot of good head coaches. And so what's fun is that you can decide that you want to go with a recruiter, but you could also go with somebody who is more notable for their player development. Like some of the line coaches at Kentucky, for example, great play in the trenches under Mark Stoops. And so Mark Stoops didn't get picked, but one of his assistants did. A lot of Ohio State assistants went before Ryan Day did. So it's a little bit of fun within the context of the 6-round draft, fun within the context of building out a staff. And the fiction that we're playing is that we've drafted these teams with quarterbacks, pass catchers, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, running backs, and linebackers. So now we need coaches to lead them. And so that's what we've been doing over the last 2 weeks.
All right, so Chip Patterson is with us, as he is every Wednesday, Cover 3 podcast, moderator, CBSSports.com, because it leads me into the first thing I wanted to talk about anyway. So in this new era of NIL and collectives, how has the recruiting rankings, how has the recruiting prowess changed? Has it been altered significantly based on the new wild West and South and East?
It is too early to tell for the 2023 cycle, but I can say that looking back at the 2022 cycle that just closed in February, not much. I mean, there is the notable, Texas A&M and, the allegations of what that collective was able to do to pull in what 24/7 Sports has deemed the highest rated recruiting class of all time. But Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, like the players at the top are still the players at the top. The big jumps, I think, aren't necessarily even coming from the NIL specific angles or the collective specific angles. They're more about the coach hirings or the coach firings or where a coaching change has been made. For example, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame was doing a very good job as one of the lead recruiters for Brian Kelly. Mm-hmm. Brian Kelly leaves to go to LSU, and guess what? Notre Dame's class didn't fall apart. In fact, it stayed strong, and Notre Dame's class in the coming year is very, very strong. I don't think that's an NIL-powered move. I think that says more about Marcus Freeman, says more about Al Washington, a great defensive line coach that he hired away from Ohio State, of Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator, who reportedly turned down the opportunity to go be an offensive coordinator for Brian Kelly at LSU. And so it's more about, the staff that we have in place. For the most part, the schools that have always been good at recruiting have always had the best resources, and those schools that have the best resources are going to be able to activate the collectives and the NIL opportunities. I don't see it changing the landscape in a dramatic way. Like I entertained the idea maybe 2 years ago that NIL would have allowed for a big shakeup in the recruiting world. I have not seen that so far. And again, we are only about a cycle and a half through the process. But let's say even like the top quarterbacks in the upcoming recruiting class, you think about the guys that would demand multi-million dollars potentially, or $1 million a year, something like that. They are committed to, Alabama. They are committed to Tennessee. They are committed to USC. I mean, they are still going to the same places that you might expect.
Although you just did say Tennessee, so we'll get to that in a minute.
I mean, they've got a very good collective.
Right, they do. Like, see, here's the way I look at the collectives. So we're going to have years where, A&M has the top class or Tennessee, but we don't have to go back that far to see that the University of Mississippi had one of the top recruiting classes out of freaking nowhere. And that, of course, ended up being they cheated. Now we don't have to cheat to do these things. We have brought all of that above board, which I'm in favor of, and I'm good with it. I hope out of nowhere, South Carolina. I just honestly just picked a school out of random. I hope a school like South Carolina, 1 year, boom, it all hits. The NIL collective comes forward, and all of a sudden, the Gamecocks have the best recruiting class. Let me throw this because there's a couple of ways I want to go, but I want to get back to Marcus Freeman because we have two Marcus Freeman issues here. One is Freeman versus his old boss, Brian Kelly, who's now at LSU. Right. And the other we'll get to in a second. I'll set it aside, but Freeman had some things to say about Ohio State, which he has since kind of retracted, but we can't unhear it. And truth is truth. But has Notre Dame, in a way, I don't mean to disparage Brian Kelly, but has Notre Dame, in a way, freed itself from Brian Kelly, and might this be the coach to take them even further?
I think Brian Kelly knew that. I think that Brian Kelly knew that Marcus Freeman was going to be able to lead Notre Dame into the next generation. My feeling is that when Marcus Freeman was hired to join Brian Kelly's staff, Jack Swarbrick, the athletic director, Brian Kelly, the head football coach, all kind of viewed him as a successor, which is why when Brian Kelly left for LSU and Notre Dame was caught a little bit off guard, Notre Dame could go to the open market. And I mean, they could have gone to talk to Luke Fickell. They could have gone to talk to, some of the top coaches and in college or pro, because it is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football program. But they stuck with the plan that I think that they initially envisioned was maybe a couple years away, but they stuck with the plan of having Marcus Freeman lead this group into the next generation. So yes, without a doubt, I think that Brian Kelly would even say that based on his age, based on his experience as a player and as a high-level player, you mentioned Ohio State. I mean, he played at Ohio State. He has that ability to connect with the modern player in a way that a lot of head coaches, and certainly not Brian Kelly at this point in his career, was able to do. So, especially keeping Tommy Rees, former Notre Dame quarterback, some of the staff hires that he's been able to make, he is reshaping the Notre Dame football program in terms of the way that he's able to go into rooms and the way he's able to recruit. And they just got Lloyd Carr's grandson to commit to Notre Dame. And I don't know if you saw it, but they got Lloyd Carr to put on a Notre Dame hat.
That is crazy.
What in the world? All the Bo Schembechling that you want to do, there is no way I would have ever predicted. Yeah. We could have seen Lloyd Carr put on a Notre Dame hat, and that's what Marcus Freeman is like. He is truly changing the profile of what Notre Dame is when he goes in to sell it to high school prospects, and that is the number one way to close the gap, because Brian Kelly got so frustrated that he thought they did everything that they could do in 2012, in 2018, in 2020. He had teams that were playing at a high level. They were experienced. They won their games, and they got to the college football playoff, and they got pantsed by teams with better players.
Right.
Yeah. Again, 2012, it was in the national championship game against Alabama. In 2018, it was in the semifinal against Clemson. And in 2020, it was in the semifinal against Alabama. All three of those teams won the national championship and were the best team that season. There is nothing inherently disappointing about losing that game, but we all stood on the outside and was like, see, Notre Dame, they always trip over themselves. And Brian Kelly literally was purple in the face, like, their players are better. Yeah. I can't do anything about it. So to close the gap with the rest of college football, you got to get better players, and that's what Marcus Freeman's trying to do.
Look, by the way, you get all this stuff at the Cover 3 podcast. I mean, Chip's the best. All right, so more about Marcus Freeman. So he came out and said the other day about Ohio State. I mean, you just take some online classes, keep your appointments. Boom, you got a program. I mean, I know he took it back, but I don't know that works. We already heard it, and it's probably not untrue what we know about Ohio State. As somebody who could have gone to Ohio State, they accepted me. We knew what it was all about. They make freshman year really hard. And then the rest of it is kind of a breeze. So certainly good. They weed everybody out, and then they just kind of make it easy for you. But what did that say? What are your thoughts on what Marcus Freeman had to say about Ohio State?
Do you or Joe Ovius have the copyrights on No Crap Exclusive?
Joe, that's Joe's. That's
Okay.
Joe's, yeah.
Notre Dame is a more academically challenging university than Ohio State.
Yeah.
No Crap Exclusive. Ohio State is a not historically, but is operating at a higher level as a football program than Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
No Crap Exclusive. Like, it's just they are so different. And I think that's what Marcus Freeman was pointing out. Is he was like, look, what we are introducing to our players is a smaller university. Like, you are going to have to go to some of these classes. The way that academics are valued all throughout your career is different than what it is at this massive university. I went to a massive university and I took a couple online classes, right?
Yeah.
It happened to work out. I was waiting tables, and also I was struggling a little bit academically. Some of the online classes helped. Some of them hurt.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need that structure, but that's my problem. But I think that for Marcus Freeman to be pointing out that the academic rigors on a day-to-day basis are very different at Notre Dame than they are at a massive state school like Ohio State is just so plainly obvious. I didn't think it was that controversial.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. And sometimes the truth hurts. It hurt. I guess it hurt Ohio State. But I don't think it matters, and I don't think it really impacts negatively.
That's his alma mater. That's like he even said that in his clarifying statement. Marcus Freeman, as he walked it back, as he mentioned, he was like, I don't know why you think, you being the media, that I would disparage my alma mater. And I believe him when he says that,
right.
that he was calling it like he sees it and experienced it, and it's different than Notre Dame academically. Does not seem controversial to me.
Here's the thing about, I've always said this about, like Myron Roll. Remember, was it Myron Roll, who Rhodes Scholar, now a doctor, and we were reintroduced to him during the pandemic when every news and sports outlet was having, hey, this guy played football at Florida State. Here's a guy, I think he came out of New Jersey, he's like from central New Jersey, and people that's exactly the kind of player that would go to a Duke or a Stanford. But Florida State wants great football players, and they want smart players too. So, I do believe that it doesn't make a difference where you go to school. If you're smart, it'll show. I mean, and if you're not, there are places you can go that will kind of help you out, keep you eligible, and keep you on the football field. But there's a lot of smart people everywhere, and Ohio State, I'm sure, has a lot of really smart football players. I just don't know them. All right, let me move on to one more thing before we take a break. Is Arch Manning going to commit, or did I miss it?
No, you did. You would listen. Adam.
When is this going to be over?
All the coaches want to have their top prospects, especially a quarterback on their board. They want to have this locked up before they turn their attention to the fall. You know who doesn't have any leverage? All of the coaches are recruiting Arch Manning. Okay? Like, Alabama already took another quarterback in the 23 cycle and still had Arch on campus this past weekend, had him posting up, taking the photos and all of the gear. Now, are things going to calm down once some of these official visits do end up wrapping up? Yes. Like, you do have a limit on the number of officials that you can go to take, though unofficially he has been to Georgia 6 or 7 times. Unofficially, he's been to Alabama 4 or 5 times. But once the official visit season sort of wraps up for Arch, then it may be a little bit further down your radar. But I mean, he can. I imagine that he is going to draw this thing out as long as he and Koopa want to, because they honestly can. And there are so few times, in the lifespan of an athlete, less now that we're sort of moving into the NIL era, but when you actually have leverage over a college football coach, and I think the Mannings probably know that from their extensive knowledge of the way football works. So they're taking their time right now, and they are enjoying the process. And I have no inkling. I've tapped into so many different potential avenues of information, including most recently somebody who's got a bay house, down in like the bay of like on the Mississippi coast,
right?
Bay house near Cooper, to try and see if they know what's going on. And I got nothing there either. So I got no clue what it's going to be. When we're sort of making bar bets, it's a Texas, it's a Georgia, it's an Alabama, maybe Georgia, maybe Texas, kind of depends on, where they end up deciding that Manning's going to be able to go and have the right combination of development, playing time, and access to the NFL.
Somebody should hire David Cutcliffe and just get this over with. All right, Chip, when we
go to the SEC, I commit to the SEC office where David Cutcliffe is right now.